A couple weeks ago, I told you my family was about to leave for a trip to the Grand Canyon. We were going to do it all without phones. And I promised to report back with how it went. Well, we're back, and honestly, the results were mixed. There were definitely some highlights. During our first meal together, we actually had a conversation. Then 3 hours later, as we drove through some awesome Nevada and Utah scenery, our kids looked out the window and actually saw the beauty around them. At night, we played family card games. It was fun. The kids even asked to play again and again and again. When Pam and I finally went to bed, they kept on playing without us. By the third day, they were making more eye contact than I'd seen in months. But the phone fast wasn't always smooth or easy. And over the course of the week, I realized something. We've totally forgotten how to be bored. Our trip actually started with a flight from Chicago to Las Vegas. We drove from there to the Grand Canyon and stopped to see all the sights in between. Before we embarked, we took the kids down the Vegas Strip to see the lights. They loved it. For that first day, I didn't hear one complaint about the lack of phones. Whoa, is that the Bellagio? That's where they filmed Ocean's 11. Dad, can we just go play one slot machine? Just once. Needless to say, Vegas was not boring. My kids were enamored with the whole scene. The neon, the glitz, the architecture, the people, the money, the busyness, all of it. Then we got to the Grand Canyon. It's thousands of feet deep, over 100 miles long. I've always wanted to see it. It was everything I hoped for and more. When you stand on the edge of it or hike down into it, you can only be amazed at how big God really is. By mid-afternoon, my kids were done. Why are we driving down these same roads to see the same view that we saw before? It all looks the same. That's when the complaints started. That's when they started missing their phones. And that's when I realized these same kids who walked wide-eyed through the streets of Vegas were bored with one of God's greatest creations. Now, there are lots of directions I could take this story. I could talk about the evil I saw at work in Las Vegas, or the beauty of nature. But my kids' struggle with our cell phone fast has me thinking a lot about boredom. Specifically, is God too boring for us? My kids were bored with God's creation. But I'm thinking bigger. I mean God himself. Are our phones, computers, iPods, 24-hour news channels, video games, DVRs, blogs, text, and the internet all just so awesome that God can't compete anymore? Seriously, is God as entertaining as a new episode of Breaking Bad? Can he hold a candle to the non-stop flow of posts on Facebook? Or maybe closer to home for me, do I care about God as much as I care about the Chicago Bears or my fantasy football team? Most of the time, if I'm honest, the answer is probably no. By comparison, God is boring. And it seems that our churches agree. So they become more entertaining, edgier, hipper, and more technologically advanced in order to keep up. They appeal to that consumer gene inside all of us that needs to be entertained in order to engage. For many of us, church is no longer a place that draws us more deeply into an authentic encounter with a transcendent God. Instead, church is simply join the ranks of organizations vying for our limited attention. It makes me wonder, who are we worshiping, really? Or maybe a better question is, what are we worshiping? I want to be mad. I want to blame this on the corporate church and shake them up and tell them to fix it. But I can't. The problem is us. Our hearts have become so captivated by the non-stop, on-demand, customized entertainment that the world offers, they're no longer captivated by a God who tells us to be still and quiet. So let's just say it. In a smartphone culture, God is boring. But is that really the problem? Do we need to ask God to turn up the fun factor a little? Maybe the real problem is that we've turned interesting and exciting into our litmus test for what's worthwhile. We spend a lot of time as Christians lamenting parts of our culture that don't line up with our values. We've accepted this part of our culture without thinking. We've totally bought into the idea that entertainment is our ultimate goal. Faster is better. More is better. Anything slower, anything less, anything boring should be forgotten. This problem has become so invisible to us that it has infected just about every part of our lives. Virtually every single one of us is guilty. So I don't think it's hyperbole to say this is one of the biggest challenges Christians face. If we want to be people filled with God's presence, if we want to be in tune with the Holy Spirit's direction, I think it's time for us to consider leaving entertaining out of the equation. I think it's time for us to totally embrace our boring God. Our God who doesn't cater to our tastes or desires. Our God who doesn't change with technology. Our God who asks us to slow down and notice the people and places that surround us. The path we're asked to walk might be boring, but God offers us a richer, more abundant life than an always connected culture ever can. Will you set down your phone and walk the way?